Hi everyone, Emily Marsh here, Marketing Manager for T3. Just wanted to say thank you ever so much for joining us today. Welcome to this webinar on using your Facet5 profile in the new world of work. There's going to be some kind of interactive elements to this webinar, so we'd encourage you to use the chat box that you'll see on your screen when our two presenters ask some questions. And also we do have a Q&A feature. We're going to save some time for Q&A at the end, but feel free to get typing your questions in there whenever they come to you, and we'll go through and select those, any that we haven't covered in the kind of main content of the webinar. So I'll hand over today then to our hosts, Paul Tizzard and Daniel Taylor, to lead you through the webinar.
Thanks, Emily. Welcome, everyone. Very strange, you can't really see a room full of faces, so you just kind of have to hope somebody's out there somewhere. But we can see that there's plenty of you that have joined, which is really great news. Been really looking forward to talking to you about this really obviously very topical subject for the next 45 minutes, hour or so. My name's Daniel Taylor. For those of you who haven't met before, my responsibility is to help educate clients on how they can use Facet5 throughout the employee life cycle within their organizations. So from one day to the next, I could be talking to them about leadership development, or maybe it is hiring new people around audition. So we really I really cover the whole kind of sphere of Facet products. And I think also I've probably run about 6 accreditations in the last couple of months, proving, I think, that lockdown hasn't stopped us. In fact, in some ways, it's been better. So really glad to be talking to you today. Paul.
Thank you. Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Paul Tizzard. So I use Facet as a tool to help people to think about themselves in a mixture of settings. So it could be one-to-one, just straight one-to-one coaching at the beginning of a series of modules, but also it can be linked into other feedbacks such as the truth teller or some other form of 360 mechanism. And occasionally as well, we use it on what we call our Making It Real events, which is like a development center, and that's a really great part of the package to help people to sort of understand what their strengths are and all the other great things that go with the Facet5.
Thanks, Paul. So we thought together about how we would bring this topic to you over the next 45 minutes, and we wanted to give you a bit more of an insight than perhaps just talking through some slides would facilitate. So what we're going to do is later on, Paul and I are going to be showing you how conversations can come to life using Facet5, particularly around this topic of new world of work. So I'm just going to give you an idea of what we're going to cover. So before we go into the main content, we need to understand this new world of work idea. So we'll look at that initially and just really kind of put a stake in the ground as to what we mean when we're talking about the new world of work, because I think we'll all agree there are certain characteristics that work now has that it perhaps didn't have before, or certainly had less of before. Then really importantly, how can Facet5 help? We've gone for, I think, quality over quantity. We've identified 3 ways using your profile and also using others' profiles to help facilitate better conversations about the new world of work. One of our guiding principles was to try and shine a light on some of the parts of the profile that perhaps don't get used as much, because there are some sort of really useful aspects of the report. So we're going to do that, and that's probably going to be the main part of what we do. And then, as always, the true value perhaps in these is also the questions that people get to ask. So we're going to be leaving, if we can, about 15 minutes at the end for you to send over your questions to us. So that's the plan. So do forgive the odd glance at the watch or the odd sort of moving swiftly on comment. So we're going to tackle first of all this idea of what do we mean by the new world of work. Paul, I think we had a good chat about this the other day, didn't we? And I think we noticed we were talking about the same kinds of things that a lot of other people talk about when they talk about lockdown, COVID, and so on. So what we've tried to do is isolate 3 main ideas actually that are probably perhaps more universal for people, but also ones that you probably don't see every time you switch the TV on or watch a news report or whatever. So I'm going to put 3 pictures on the screen, and we can have a bit of fun with this just to get you warmed up. And what we'd like you to do is send your chat message, and I want you to try and guess these pictures. Now, hopefully you can see them. No?
No, not yet.
They're not coming up.
No, might be worth
Okay, right.
unshare
Let's
and reshare.
try. One second.
One of the things I've loved about the virtual world, and I think it's a great benefit, is that people have shown a lot more kindness and patience when you're running this, because for the most part, they're just grateful that they're not the ones having to work it all. That's now working, Daniel.
So you can see 3 pictures, one of which is not Ed Sheeran on the toilet, I promise. Send us a chat message to everyone if you can, or just to the panelists. Giving what do you think we're going to be focusing on as our 3 key kind of new world of work themes today? And I'm going to incriminate nobody, so. Okay. No thoughts. What do we think the pictures might mean? Okay. Someone's sent over confusion. Certainly the bottom one is certainly is supposed to be representing that. Okay. You're very shy, which is quite worrying, but there we go. Downtime away from work, yeah, potentially. Although if I've got my laptop with me, I'm probably not having downtime. So there's 3 themes that we think are the most interesting to explore, the ones that we're going to be basing our conversations around today. Are the first one is obviously that's a COVID-19 virus, top left. Not just the virus itself. I think we're all obviously really clear on what that means to everybody. More specifically, dealing with the threat of COVID-19. So in other words, how it feels to walk around, see on the TV, people wearing masks, children being kept away from schools, public transport, laws being enforced around social distancing, wearing masks. So this whole idea of how does it make us feel? And I think this is a really important thing to consider. So in other words, how are we dealing with that constant threat? We may not feel particularly vulnerable ourselves, but we all know people that are. And also we're all come into contact with it in some way in terms of this threat. So how's the threat making us feel is a really important part of how people have had to adapt to working over these past few months, with it kind of looming there in the background, and it isn't going to go away either. So again, that's something for people. So that's our first idea. The second idea, so the chap scratching his head, is a comment on, I think it was one of my colleagues, wasn't it, Paul, who said that it feels like a new place to work.
That's right. Yeah. So coming back to, it's not coming back to my old job. I'm coming back to a new job, even though everyone who was there before was the same, and they've only been off for 3 months. So it's a bit of a one to get your head around, isn't it?
Yeah. So the idea that some people will have come back off furlough, other people will just find their new world completely different. So dealing with that confusion and the emotional side of it. So again, that's really, really important. The other thing that I think we've experienced in the way we do things, and kind of parallels with what other people have experienced, is the third picture, which is supposed to represent learning agility. So we've had to adapt and work and learn how to use technology, for example, and do our jobs in very different ways, which have really tested our ability to learn to do things differently. And as we know, Facet5 profiles will give us an insight into how that feels and whether we are feel able to do things in a different way, or whether we are quite stuck in our ways. So these are our three themes. And what I think is important is, first of all, let's think about those three themes in the light of what Facet5 how Facet5 can help us. So moving on slide.
So one of the things, as we all know, is that people that have signed up for this, I'm a little bit preaching to the converted with the audience here, but just to sort of remind us all, you know, on the screen there are the main things that we might say that Facet brings to us, but there are lots of tools out there that will allege to do the same thing. But what I love for one of these crucial, critical conversations, and an important conversation with people that you'll be having, and you may be consistently having with people, this is an important conversation. For some, it could be the first time they've ever thought about this, and we're offering a framework or a lens to see themselves through. So one of the things that really helps when we use the Facet5 is that we can feel some reassurance knowing that actually this is a robust and trustworthy tool. So if we are having these conversations which dip beyond the everyday world of work, we're moving into fairly safe territory, because we know that people have done the work behind the scenes to make sure that the tool gives us reliable information to help this person to look at themselves. So that's what I love about the Facet, is that, you know, you could use lots of tools, but this one, as you know, as you all know, is reliable and it's robust, and it's a great friend to have with you when you're having those type of important conversations. And I saw one the other day on LinkedIn. It was a little reference actually to something that Daniel had run, and this person was saying that they had literally lit up their world because they hadn't thought about it before. It's their first experience. And for some of us listening on this call, maybe we forget how critical it can be in a person's development to suddenly get this bit of feedback about themselves. So I never underestimate or undervalue how powerful a tool like this is. So that's why I like it.
Excellent, thanks, Paul.
Shall I shut up now, Daniel? Is that enough?
I'll tap my watch.
Back in your box. Yeah.
Right. So we sat and thought, okay, how can we use a Facet5 profile? Obviously, we're spoilt for choice, and we've gone for three ideas that will be hopefully bring something new and get you thinking about aspects of the report that we think get neglected a little bit, to be honest. So when we run accreditation, we're very keen to take people through the different aspects of the report, but some of it inevitably gets focused on more than other parts. So with our themes of threat, confusion, and agility, which are the three ideas in the world of work, we are going to look at three ways in which a profile can aid discussion and give people greater insight, not only to others, but also themselves. The first of those is the work preferences report. Now, you're all familiar with the report. This is the final page of the report, and much overlooked, we felt. It looks like it's the one that looks like that without the scribbles. So just to remind everybody what we mean with the work preference report, I'll give you a reminder. The other two things we're going to have a look at are using the factor scores themselves. We haven't got enough time to go into the detail that you can with the factor scores, but looking at how you can use the essence of your profile to start to think about, that's why I find that difficult, or that's why I'm coping better than I thought I would. So that's the second idea. The third idea will be using the leading edge report. We know that the leading edge report in the profile is a great way of getting insight into that individual. So those are our three focus areas, and we're going to do this through the medium of conversation. So Paul and I are going to use our own experiences and our own profiles to highlight how you can use these three things to shed light on some of these workplace challenges that we now have. So hopefully has the slide changed? Or,
yeah.
Cool. Okay, had a few technical problems. The work preferences report uses the 4 main factor scores and is situated in the back of the report and describes 4 intrinsic motivators based upon your factor scores for will, energy, affection, and control. The score for your will factor will indicate the nature of the power within the workplace that you prefer. So whether you prefer to be in a position of influence, or whether you're more comfortable being in a position of followership or acceptance. So that's the first area. And immediately you can see where certain aspects will play into how we feel about what we're doing. The second area is fairly straightforward. It talks about the level of participation we like to have based on our energy score. So ranging from wanting to work fairly separately and feeling more productive and enjoying work more as a separate individual, to somebody who has to participate in everything to feel like they're valued and that they're doing their best work. So participation is the second one. The third one is about people orientation and the degree to which you prefer to share ideas and thoughts. So in the same way that the teamscape affection relates to the sharing of ideas, a higher affection score will dictate that people prefer environments where they're interested in each other and they're sharing ideas and they're being open and curious and so on, versus people who prefer to gather information in a much more pragmatic way. So that's our third area. So that's around people. And then naturally the process part, the fourth one, shows us our motivators around how much freedom versus organization we like to have in our workplace environment. So if I'm of a higher control score, then I will feel more comfortable in an environment which is structured, well organized, and I will feel more motivated by a more autonomous and free environment if I'm lower control. That's the broad idea. And now the theme really here is with the work preferences report is that we can use the content of the report to highlight workplace drivers, but also workplace barriers. So I'm just going to show you what we mean by that.
And one of the things I think the reason we picked this particular area was that, not that it gets overlooked, but it's very easy, you know, there's so much great stuff in there that by the time you get to this part of the report, the person could be suffering from brain fade because they think, crikey, there's lots of information for me to learn about myself. And so it's not that you don't cover it, but it's just that we thought it would be nice to breathe a bit of fresh air into a bit of life into it again by going back and just perhaps picking this one page and using it through the lens of the current situation that we're in.
So what we're going to do is we're going to use this and kind of
just filling in the time, Daniel, while you change the slide. That was all right.
Has it come up?
Yeah, you're all there. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, good. So your report here, Paul, outlines 8 motivators based upon what your profile is telling us. So you've got 8 items there which are supposedly key to you maintaining motivation and interest in your work. If you look down that list, which of the things on that list are most important to you, do you think?
Okay, so obviously I've seen this before, but a while ago. We tried to keep this fairly unstructured so that I had to actually read it like a normal human would. Okay, so the second one, the last one, so being of service to others, that's important. It's not that the others aren't important, but things change, don't they? Different times, different situations, others might be more parallel. But I think right now, being of service to others and not having to aggressively promote selves, those two are right now.
And really interestingly, I think a few weeks back we were talking about this, and that being a service to others, if that's a real driver for you. So in the normal situation of how you were doing your role, how often do you get to kind of exercise that, as it were, or how does your role allow you to do that?
Most of the time, as a facilitator or a coach, I'm out and about, and I can make a very direct link to my high affection, which is obviously what prompting that score there, and being able to make a link to the work that I do. I genuinely feel the work that we do helps others, and so for the most part, it's a big tick. I guess my concern at the beginning of the COVID stuff was that, would all that go away? But fortunately, we were fairly swift, and our clients responded really well. We've been able to keep going doing the virtual, so still able to help people, and to some degree doing some of the I've been doing a lot of facets and spotlight lately, and using the intimacy of this system, and we're expecting it. People have said they found it really beneficial because they felt they could do it at a time that suited them. It felt very personal. We're looking at their report together, and it was quite a focused time. So I would say definitely that's been one that I've been able to sustain throughout.
No, that's really good.
Thank you.
And something we did touch on was how is this, given that we're based from home an awful lot, and there's a bit of a blur between work and home. How can that be challenging for you sometimes, though?
I think the wanting to help others is a problem because you're now suddenly more available. So for me, I don't like saying no to people. So I've got 3 or 4 other humans in the house that can easily just wander by, knock on the door. Can you just help with da da da? And I'm pulled into it. So I have to literally have rules to guard my time, to protect it, stop me trying to help. And the other thing is overcommitting. So even with colleagues and stuff, you can see there's lots of work to be done. It's very easy to just say, oh, I can do that because I'm just at home anyway. But actually, the reality is we're all at home trying to work during the crisis. It's not our choice. We'd rather be out and about. So it's very easy to overload oneself, and I think that's been a danger for me.
No, that's
I don't know if
interesting.
that's your question, but that's the answer.
No, I think you can see there how the context of how we're now expected to work, it puts a strain on something which is a strength that you have, but it needs managing. So it's a really valuable to be able to kind of know about that and understand that, both hopefully for you, but also in situations where we have colleagues and or people that we manage, being able to understand how things are providing that strain. So using the sort of motivators on the work preferences report is one way, as we've demonstrated there, by using a couple of really simple questions. You can start to explore how somebody's experiencing having to work, how they're having to work now. So you can use it to understand their feelings, how they're coping, and so on. I'm going to go to the second part now, and as well as the motivators, what the work preferences report also tells us is demotivators and things that can frustrate us equally as important. And so in the same way, what are the things there that you would kind of choose, Paul, that are the key ones that demotivate you? So if you had to choose the top 2 or 3.
It's interesting when I look at those, I can relate to all of them. If I think of your second question there, the biggies for right now, I think constant and tight supervision is something I don't like. So I don't choose roles that have that. It doesn't work for me, and that's kind of linked to my low control score as well, probably. But I've noticed that some clients have told me that they've also found that they've been overly monitored, so that now they're at home, there are some suspicious colleagues and even bosses that are doing things like making sure they check in too much. to be honest, and being a little bit inflexible in the way that they work. Because I haven't experienced that, but I know that we've got one of my daughter's boyfriends, not like she's got lots of them, one of my daughters, her boyfriends live with us, and he's often worried about being monitored, and he works for a large organization, and so if he he goes for lunch, his girlfriend goes onto his computer and wiggles his mouse every sort of 10 to 15 minutes to just to sort of show that he's still alive. And I just think, what sort of pressure is that putting on somebody? And that would literally kill me off. But I think it's unrealistic for anybody.
It's interesting. The type of environment that we are in now is, and I kind of relate to that as well. It feels more structured because people make a point of checking in with you, and people make a point of things are less free flowing. And I think with a lower control score, you prefer an environment to be less formal by nature, and so the supervisory element, which has to be almost structured, can make it feel really straight, like a straitjacket almost, I think.
Yeah.
And so that's an element that clearly, when we're aware of it, we need to manage it and know that it can actually create frustration and demotivate people. You're smiling.
Well, I just feel like we're violently agreeing with each other. It's. I think there's also I mean, maybe it's to come up in your profile, and we look a bit at that in a minute. But there's also an energy thing about this. Like how much communication that you generally need. I think even, I have a lower energy preference, and so I'm quite happy in my own company, but even with that, I still need contact. So I think the conversation is important here, because it's like, without the person feeling like they're being monitored, but also not being ignored. And the only way to know where that is to actually talk to the human and say, oh, this is what it says on your report. What's the world for you like? Because this report's obviously a snapshot, an indication. It just so happens I do agree with all these, but sometimes people go, well, I'm not really sure. It's not 100% right. So, well, what is right? And it provokes a very good conversation.
Excellent. Yeah, I think you can use quite a lot of these elements to explore somebody's likes and dislikes at work. And what's also really important is that we have a conversation around what do you feel has changed, and a lot has changed. We're still doing, arguably, we're doing the same role, we have the same purpose, but we have to do it in a different way. So kind of a first tip really for what we were thinking about was to really use this work preferences report to see how well people were aligned previously and how well they're aligned now to how they like to work. Just a few examples there to kind of bring that to life. Thanks for sharing your views and your profile there, Paul. It's my turn now.
That's okay. I feel a little bit exposed, but I'm okay with it.
Let me join you. So, the second area we were going to look at is the factor scores themselves. Now, before Paul starts to cross-examine me, I'm just going to point out that we did some snippet videos that were quite well received on LinkedIn right at the beginning of all this madness, where we were talking about what our factor scores meant to how we were experiencing the workplace. And so in a similar way, you can use the factor scores to explore that. So what did you want to ask me, Paul?
Well, respectfully, I'm looking at this, as we know, that this gives an average shape of where you are. So this is not showing. There is a lot of subtlety that comes with the Facet5, which is one of the things I particularly like. So you've got these 13 sub factors. This isn't showing that. This is just kind of showing it broadly. So I'm mindful as I leap into this of being curious but not judgmental, because, for example, in your wheel score, where I can't quite read it because my glasses, I've got the wrong glasses on. Anyway, so I know that there could be some lower ones and some really high ones in there, but we've kind of averaged out around whatever that 6 mark is. So with that in mind, and using the filter of, okay, so what does this tell me about how you deal with the threat of COVID? What's the difference for you with the change. So whether you've come back from furlough or maybe you've stayed in the workplace, but how your work's changed and what's your learning agility, it straight away makes you think, okay, I wonder what I could ask to find out. So I'm going to leap in and ask you about a couple of your areas here. And obviously you can answer as little as you like. Yeah. So when I look at your energy score there, what's that like for you working at home?
That's a really interesting one. And what I've noticed, because in our roles we have to work from home as part of what we do anyway. So that aspect of it, I was all set up for and comfortable with. What I did notice, and a secret fear that I have a few months' time, is that I enjoy working at my desk at home if I can hear a buzz going on in the house. Now that might not be kids screaming and fighting, but fortunately that doesn't happen too much with my two. But knowing that there are other things going on in the house is really important to me, because that's kind of like stimulation. The minute the house goes silent and I have to work by myself at my desk, I'm open to all kinds of distractions. So that for me, I've quite enjoyed having children being homeschooled and my wife not working and helping with them downstairs, because I know something else going on in the house. And that's helped me feel more calm. The minute it goes quiet yet remains to be seen, because I haven't done 5 days from home in a row that often in an empty house. That's something that plays into my energy score around liking something going on around me. I'm not the world's most sociable person sometimes, but I like to have a bit of a buzz around me with work.
So thank you for that. So if we were to take that forward, so at the moment it works, and it sounds like when there's a buzz around, it helps you to focus because the buzz is elsewhere. When the buzz disappears, then you try and find your own buzz by following distractions and stuff. So if when we go back, so things change, which of course they will, what will you do? What strategies will you put in place to help yourself if you end up at home with no buzz around you?
Interesting, isn't it? Because I've also found, being, as you can see, my control score is quite low. I like a flexible, informal environment to feel like I'm getting the most out of myself. So scheduling a catch up at 4 o'clock every day with a colleague won't do it for me, because it's too structured. I want to be able to share thoughts with colleagues as and when they occur to me. So for me, it will be more about how can I set up a kind of inflexible, ad hoc kind of way of interacting with, mainly with colleagues and so on. So using chat messaging and things like that. I love doing that, because I can send a chat message when something occurs to me, and that person can choose to respond when they want. So, but it gets it out of my head, as it were. So for me, that would be a key part of how I keep myself entertained, for want of a better word, while I'm working silently at home.
Yes. I mean, and if I may, I mean, there's a million things I'd love to ask you on that, but just for the purposes of crudely diving in on another one, can we link to your low control, as you just mentioned it? How does that play out in terms of the third filter that we're talking about, was the learning agility? Does that give you an advantage, disadvantage, or no difference?
Well, that's a good point. I find people with lower control, and myself included, and it's one of the descriptors is that you're quick to learn new things. So because, and I guess the emphasis is on quick, because there isn't I don't need chapter and verse instruction manual, detailed guidelines, etc., unless it looks extremely technical. So I pick things up and I use them very quickly. So for me, that low control really helps. So in terms of things like picking up, facilitating like we are now, using the technology, I'm kind of happy with all of that, and I'm equally happy to talk to a client about how they might want to do things differently. So I think that's a key part of it. That's what it means to me. But if I can just highlight the flip side without us sort of overrunning too much, the flip side is somebody there needs to provide a bit of structure for me, because I can be very flexible about how I work, including when I work. So if I haven't got a meeting diaried in, then I work flexibly around things like that. So it is a blessing and a curse, but it does really help the learning agility. And I also love new things. I like doing things differently. Don't tell me to do something the way I've always done it. Ask me how I do it differently, and I'm there. So
that's useful, isn't it? So that's useful general context, but that's really interesting right now as well. And if their time permits, the slides have gone, by the way, but I can remember.
Sorry, I think it's because Emily's told us we've sent me a time check. How's that?
Hurry up. So let me.
No, not at all. I asked her to let us know when it was 1:30.
Yeah. All right. So the this is, we both suffer from low control, so we're relying on Emily to provide some. So when I look at your emotionality, it looks like you're bang smack in the middle there, pretty much. So how does that play out in terms of one of your things we talked about was the threat of COVID? I don't know if there's been any research around the links to COVID and emotionality, but I wonder if you've made any sort of like assumptions or links to it. So thinking, with you in mid-range, does that mean that you've been kind of reasonably worried, or does that mean that you've been, I mean, what's it mean? Are you sanitizing every 3 minutes, or are you kind of like, it'd be fine? Does it link to your emotionality score?
1 second, I just need to sanitize. What you can't see there is the difference between my tension and my apprehension score. So my apprehension score is a lot higher than my tension. It's up in, I think it's around 7.1 or something like that. And my tension score is a lot lower. So I've got that classic split. For me, it means I think ahead and I don't worry, but I think ahead and wonder what I would need to do if this happened. So I'm in no way threatened by COVID. I actually had the virus back in March, and took 10 days to get over it. But I'm always described as someone who's quite laid back anyway. So what you don't see is what I'm thinking quite often.
Yeah.
So no, I don't harbour a huge anxiety towards it. I think with mid-range emotionality, it would be some things only that would stress me out. So probably having to get public transport again with a mask on, of course, rather than driving my own car will be something that I think ahead and I think about a lot ahead of time. So, but I don't get particularly tense about it. It's kind of up here. I'm not sure if that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I mean, I was just curious. I think it's an interesting one, the emotionality linked to this general perceived threat out there. Like how alert are we to risk? What's our sort of general pessimism or it'll be okayness? And so thank you for sharing that. I realized that was a kind of really crude dance around it, and I'd like to have spent more time with each of them. But that's certainly just picking 3 there, I felt like I got a bit of an understanding of what it must be like for you, as much as I can anyway.
Thanks a lot. No, and for everyone listening and watching, it's those kinds of conversations, and Paul demonstrated that really well, how you can get people talking using safe language about how they're feeling about what's going on right now. So using factor scores is obviously a very simple way of looking at the profile, but you can get tremendous depth from the discussion. So just going to go on to the final one, and it was entirely intentional that this final one is more of a go and take a look for yourself almost, because we've got all of these family-based reports based on the family profile at the back of the in the second half of the Facet5 report, leading edge, which to those fans of cars will know about the Haynes manual, which is kind of like the Haynes manual to the individual in the report. It's how to work best with them and get the most out of them. And that leading edge report is really valuable in understanding what somebody needs. So in a similar way to work preferences, only in a slightly more possibly generalized way. It will tell you things which are quite important. I don't know if you've looked at yours, Paul, but mine says, I pulled a couple of things out of it just to share. It says, keep me occupied and offer plenty of variety, because I become easily bored by routine and detail, which is why this webinar is only an hour long and not 2. But I'm joking. So it's about that environment, and quite often what I have found is that the same place, same desk, same computer, 5 days in, 5 days out, has felt slightly a bit of a grind at times. And so I've done things like taking the opportunity to work in another part of the house if it's quiet enough.
You like to mix it up, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, if I'm sitting with my manager talking about this, they'll understand me a bit more.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would emphasise, which we have mentioned, is treating people as individuals. The section which is bottom left, it says offer me a forum to meet informally with colleagues and share ideas, problems, and results. So that idea that you can just have a chat. It doesn't have to lead to actions or outputs. It's just to have a chat because it's informal. It's kind of satisfying that kind of checking in ad hoc nature of how I prefer things to be sometimes.
Daniel, can I ask you a quick question there?
Yeah, go for it.
So when I'm looking at this, is this yours that we're looking at now?
Yeah, you probably can't read it.
Yeah, so it looks like you're quite close to the family shape, but obviously not exact. So if I was to ask you as a percentage, what accuracy would you say this offers you?
It's really interesting, and hopefully everybody who debriefs Facet5 knows how to almost caveat this one with the fact that it's the best fit. There are things which talk about having high will, which, as you can see, I'm not quite there on the high will in this profile report. It says I enjoy high profile positions of authority and responsibility. And if you call running a webinar a high profile position of authority, it's not really something I crave. And it also says I like to have, I saw it somewhere. It says be clear of my manager needs to be aware that I can be hard on people because it's assuming my affection is a lot lower than it actually is. So some of that best fit doesn't quite fit as best it could.
Yeah.
But it's got some really key things in.
But the important thing was it provoked conversation. So even if it's not quite right, it doesn't matter because then we get to the actual, well, what is right? That's what I want to know about, because then I can work with you on that,
Absolutely. So again, I don't know about you, Paul, but people sometimes don't see not see the value. They don't use the value in it because there is a lot in one of these reports. And if you're doing your average debrief, you talk about the family profile. If you've had a really great conversation, you're into your final 5-10 minutes. So it warrants a follow up, but also it warrants sharing it with the manager, like we've demonstrated. So
I agree. I think and if you haven't looked at it for a while, it's a fresh way of looking at it. So rather than starting at the beginning and go, yeah, I remember all that, you start from the back, work that way, and then you're suddenly looking at it anew because you might not have read this properly the first time through. So I always think they're worth bringing out again and having a quick check through. And often you'll see things that you weren't ready to see the first time round because you might have reached sort of brain overwhelm as you were taking it in.
I could share one of those actually that I've not really picked up on before. Just as a sort of a final point, parting shot. It says I've never noticed it, but it says Daniel can be relied upon to be blunt and direct, which is something that my wife tells me sometimes, but it's something that I'm probably less aware of. So there you go. I've seen something in it that I haven't noticed before. So
interesting. Yeah.
Cool.
I haven't experienced that in you at all, but I'm assuming she knows you better.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so that's pretty much got us to our final quarter of an hour. So just to summarize, in dealing with threat, learning new skills, finding yourself in a different kind of environment to perhaps you're used to, we've recommended exploring the work preferences sort of profile on page 17 of the report, looking at the factor scores in more detail and using leading edge to give people more insight into how you like to work. So hopefully that's given you a few thoughts and sort of nuggets to take away. Like we've said, particularly the first and the third idea there aren't really explored as well as they could be. So thanks for listening. I think it's over to Emily now. We're going to answer some of your questions, if you have some.
Yes, there was a problem
Yes.
with the chat box, so I think some of them may have come in through the Q&A, but I'll shut up now and let Emily do it.
No problem, no problem. Yeah, I think it was a slight issue. So we've got everyone's questions and comments. So I've got a 2 or 3 here to start with. So firstly, someone's asking, with the recommendations that you've made, do people need to do a new report or can they work from their existing one?
We'll take that, Paul.
Yeah. It depends how long ago it was. I've looked at old reports of mine from lots of profiles, and I've often found common themes, even if it's quite old, that are still relevant. There'll be some changes. So, there's no sort of hard and fast rule to this, but if you're looking at, say, over 7 or 8 years, or you've maybe done a couple of major job changes, then it's worth getting a new one to see whether you're using different preferences, perhaps. But no, I think that these tools are pretty robust. I'm not here to upsell. Yes, you must buy one every 2 years. I think that's too much. Certainly when there's been a period of time, I would definitely recommend getting another one, and particularly if you're in a new team and you're looking to do something like a Teamscape or something like that, where you want to kind of mash them all together. It'd be interesting to see. I've been pleasantly surprised with some of my reports that I've done them like 10 years later and have been almost exactly the same. And other profiles I've done show me very different. So you have to think, what was going on when I filled that in. And so it's definitely, I hope that's answered it, but yeah. So don't leave it too long, but if it's been fairly recent and there's been no major changes, I would stick with the one you got.
I had to answer an inquiry from a client the other day, and they were asking me about the technicalities behind the report, and having won quite a lot of accreditations recently, and the figures in my head that the reliability is the retest reliability on Facet5 is around 0.82, so it's pretty high, and it's also
very good
higher than some of the others. So that you have to trust the science, really.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for the question.
Great. So another one then. So I just thought interesting that you mentioned in passing about teams there, Paul, because we have had a question about what about teams as they work differently now, and would Teamscape help?
Yeah, I had lots of inquiries about this one. Teams have to work virtually now. So the way I see it is Teamscape has to work virtually. We still need to work together to come up with ideas, evaluate them, make decisions, get things going as per the work cycle, for example. So running Teamscape virtually is entirely possible, and we're looking at sort of relaunching our accreditation with certain minor differences. Naturally, you can't get together and do the line dance very easily. And if your workplace is in a position where you are all back at work, I would put it down to being careful in terms of how you do the line dance. You could feasibly do it around a room somehow with gaps between people. But principally, the idea of a Teamscape still applies. So you can use the work cycle to have a discussion about what do we look like. You can use the differences between people's factor and sub-factor scores to explore what they might be doing differently. And there is a new angle, as we've explored on this webinar. You can get people to talk about what they're finding difficult now and what they feel they're coping well with. So I don't know what you think, Paul, but I still think there's a huge amount of relevance.
Yeah, I think there's always a relevance for it. I mean, the main thing is to build, whenever you do these things, is to build enough psychological safety for people to speak, and you're going at the pace of the group. So the hidden dynamic is always there, no matter what tool you use. Teamscape's great. It's got some very safe language. It's got nice ways of bringing people together, and you can get people up and about if that's the comfort level. But not every team that I've ever worked with wants to do that. And you can still work with it. So I don't think the virtual environment stops it. In fact, I think there's having a structured way of getting people together around something gets them talking. It's like if you go to a dinner party and there's but nothing's out yet, and you're kind of staring at each other, it's awkward. Whereas if you've got an activity, you know, or does anyone want to come through, or here's the start, or, you know, anything that just gives people reason to talk. So provided you've got the safety, Teamscape is a fantastic way to get people going. I don't know why I talked about the dinner example.
That helps.
Great. Okay. So another one that we've got here then, obviously you mentioned a lot about these reports being great in terms of providing support to a member of staff, but how do you deal with people who perhaps don't want to openly share their profile?
Are you going for that one, Daniel, or are you still thinking?
This applies generally to the idea of I think this is always a tricky one. You can't make somebody share their profile. We know that, and a lot of the willingness comes in knowing what the profile is there for. We give guidance when we accredit people that it's about exploring things such as learned versus natural behavior. So if somebody sees their profile and can't recognize themselves, you need to explore areas such as, you know, how much are they adapting their own natural preferences in the role that they do, or are they referring to themselves purely in one situation? If somebody won't share their profile, I think it's about trying to help them see the value. And I guess you've got the inherent problem of sort of sharing and being fairly resistant to it. So having a conversation about anything else, such as how we're coping with working in a new world, would equally be tricky. It's a really hard one to answer. But I usually say, give the conversation another revisit and try and position it not as a judgmental tool, but as a descriptive tool. I think people can get quite intimidated when they think they're being judged as well. But it's not there to do that. It's there to describe. Paul, any thoughts?
Yeah, a few. I'll try and summarise them. I thought, you know, this would cause questions around to me. What's going on here? You know, is that, are we not in rapport in terms of this? We've built enough trust already that. So then that's something that I'd be looking at. Has my curiosity turned into more of a judgment? You know, and so if I, as a trained coach, I haven't really experienced this, because there's normally a way round, as long as you're not desperate to go straight for, you know, a coach is more likely to pull than push. So maybe if you've got too much of your own agenda, or you're worried about the time or something like that, you might start trying to push an individual and they will then just shut down. And so I would say trying to stay curious, make sure that you've practiced some good coaching type skills, you know, being listening and not rushing them. And then if you're trying to pace them and go where they are, I don't see why anybody wouldn't share eventually, even if it does mean we kind of go, well, you know, that's great for today, we can come back to it, like you said, Daniel.
What I would say is, if there are any individual challenges out there to anybody that's tuned in today, please get in touch with us, because we'll help you and give you some suggestions, because we deal with requests like that quite often, about, you know, queries around reports and queries around profiles and so on. So don't hesitate to drop us a line.
Lovely. Okay. Just a couple more then. So one here, this might put you on the spot very slightly. What are the
Daniel,
norm
this
group
is your
sizes,
question. Sorry.
and how up to date are they?
Say that again, sorry.
Sorry, interrupted.
What are the norm group sizes and how up to date are they?
Ooh, norm group for UK population is 30. Let me just read it off here.
30,
I've got it right
36,
here.
isn't it? 36,000.
36,000. This is when my report was last run. Now there is a point about norm groups that I'm getting to. 36,203. It will always tell you on your profile which norm group you've used and the size of that norm group. Total Facet5 respondents goes into the over 100,000. So if you look in your manual, it'll tell you that there are over 104,000 profiles altogether. Now the point is, a norm group, then if you're topping a norm group up with a few more profiles, it doesn't make a massive amount of difference to how your score will come out. If you're changing norm groups, so if you're going from one country to another and you're using a different national norm group, so if you're coming from India to the UK or whatever, your norm group, your scores will be different in those two contexts. But in terms of norm groups getting bigger in terms of number, statistically, it doesn't really impact things that much, because it's a drop in the ocean, literally. So it does not affect it. But those are the approximate numbers.
Great. Okay. Lovely. And just one more that we've got here then. With Leading Edge being focused on families rather than individual profiles, what if someone doesn't agree with their family?
Oh,
This is you know, personally, this does happen, doesn't it? We've probably all experienced this, where somebody has a reaction to it, and normally I will find that if we say, you don't have to 100% agree with it, because this has kind of averaged out some of your sub factors. By then you've already been through some of the subtlety, and hopefully you've gained some sort of agreement by the time you get to the family. So to have a violent reaction at that point would be surprising, because you should be able to talk around it and say, okay, look, we're going through some of these comments here, which do you agree with and which do you don't? Because at the end of the day, we're not trying to sell it to them. They've already bought the profile, they've received it, and now we're helping them to make use of it. So if they go through it, I've found some people have said, I don't quite agree with it, but when we actually go through the comments and take a bit of time, it's never been more than a third of the comments that are inaccurate. And sometimes they're just slightly wrong. And I don't think that's too bad. You know, this is, you know, to get somebody fairly well positioned in terms of the facet is a remarkable feat. But to get it 100% right, that's an aspiration I don't think is possible.
yeah, I'd agree with that. And I'd also add, we always advise the family profile is treated with a little bit of caution, because if you imagine the way they're written, unless I'm a chameleon, where I've got a mid-range on all full factors, the descriptions are catering for either low or high. So in a very simplified way, if I score 5.6 on a factor, that's tipping me from mid-range into the high, sort of split of 50-50, if you see what I mean. So sometimes the descriptions will be written to cater for more of an extreme or less of an extreme, depending on what your scores are. On a practical note, it is possible to look at second and third closest relatives on the system. So your family profile is the best fit. There will always be one or two other profiles that are the second and third best fit. And it's advisable to go into the system and have it, and you can look this up when you look at someone's profile. You go into their record and it can tell you what their second and third closest fit profile is. So if you get a really strong kind of disagreement with the family profile, that's what you can do, is have a look at the second and third best fit. But I totally agree with what you said there, Paul. Once you've got the essence of your own profile, the family profile is only there to be a very kind of broad description. Hopefully that helps.
Lovely. Okay, thank you very much. Right, we're coming up to time, so I think we'll probably have to leave it there. Thank you so much to Daniel and Paul for joining us today. Thank you everyone who attended. We'll be sending out a recording of this session and the slides as well for you to have a look through. And of course, as Daniel mentioned there, if you have any questions or any comments that you want to leave, then please do get in touch. We'll be more than happy to help out if we can. So thank you ever so much to everyone, and we hope to see you at another event.
Brilliant. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.